Picture this, it's 2 in the morning. You pull into a highway rest stop and every single truck in that lot has its engine running. The low rumble fills the whole parking area. And your first thought is probably, why? Are these guys really just burning diesel all night long? The answer is way more interesting than you'd expect. And it has nothing to do with laziness. That idling truck isn't wasting fuel, it's doing a job. Multiple jobs, actually. And once you understand what's going on inside that cab and behind that trailer, you'll never hear that diesel hum the same way again. Let's start with the driver, because this is where most people miss the point entirely. Long-haul truck drivers aren't just people who drive a lot. They live in their trucks. The sleeper cab behind the driver's seat is their bedroom, their break room, and sometimes their home for weeks at a time. And federal law, specifically the Hours of Service regulations from the FMCSA, requires that drivers take a mandatory 10-hour rest break before they can get back behind the wheel. That break has to happen inside the cab, so that driver isn't choosing to sit in a parking lot. They're legally required to be there. And while they're there, they still need heat in January and air conditioning in July, just like anyone sleeping in a room. Here's where it gets interesting, for plainly put. We love explaining how things actually work, so if this is your kind of content, hit subscribe. We break down the science behind stuff like this every week. Now back to why the engine specifically has to keep running. A diesel engine isn't like a light switch you can flip on and off without consequences. These engines weigh thousands of pounds. The blocks are made of cast iron. And in freezing temperatures, cold metal contracts, oil thickens, and fuel, actual diesel fuel, starts to gel. Attempting a cold start on a big diesel in sub-zero temperatures puts enormous stress on every component. Cylinder walls, injectors, turbochargers. Repeated cold starts over hundreds of thousands of miles are a real and significant source of engine wear. Keeping the engine warm overnight isn't just about comfort. It protects an asset that can cost $150,000 or more and needs to keep running for 1,000,000 miles. But here's something most people never think about. Some of those drivers are running medical equipment while they sleep. CPAP machines, the devices used to treat sleep apnea, are incredibly common among long-haul truckers. And sleep apnea is actually diagnosed at higher rates in the trucking population than in the general public, partly because of irregular schedules, sitting for extended periods, and weight gain from sedentary work. These machines run on electricity, and that electricity comes from the truck's alternator, which only produces power when the engine is running. For a driver with a CPAP, shutting the engine off isn't a financial decision, it's a health decision. Without the machine, they don't sleep properly, and a driver who doesn't sleep properly is a danger on the road the next morning. Now let's move to the back of the truck, because this is where things get really fascinating. A large portion of the trucks you see idling at rest stops are pulling refrigerated trailers, called reefer trailers in the industry. These trailers carry things that cannot, under any circumstances, get warm. Produce, dairy, pharmaceuticals, vaccines, insulin, biologics that lose their effectiveness the moment they drift outside a precise temperature window. Insulin, for example, must be stored between 36 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Fresh produce has its own temperature requirements. Some cargo needs to stay exactly 34 degrees all night long. Not approximately 34 degrees, exactly. Because the difference between 34 and 38 degrees isn't just a number, it's the difference between cargo that arrives usable and cargo that gets rejected at the loading dock and thrown away. The refrigeration units on these trailers run on diesel, and they run constantly, not because someone forgot to turn them off, but because the cold chain, the unbroken line of controlled temperature from farm or factory to store shelf, is one of the most critical logistics systems in the modern food supply. Every time you pick up a carton of milk or a bag of salad greens that's still cold and fresh, part of the reason it made it to you in that condition is because a truck somewhere kept its engine running overnight. So at this point you might be wondering, okay, but surely there's a better way to do this. And there is, it just costs money. The most common alternative to main engine idling is something called an auxiliary power unit, or APU. An APU is essentially a small, separate diesel generator mounted on the truck frame. Instead of running the massive main engine all night, which displaces 14 liters or more and produces hundreds of horsepower, the APU runs instead. It's a fraction of the size, burns a fraction of the fuel, and can handle climate control and electrical loads without waking up the neighborhood. A P-us work. Fleets that use them see meaningful reductions in fuel costs and engine wear. The problem is the upfront price tag. A quality APU installation runs between $8,000 and $12,000. For large fleets, that math eventually makes sense. For an independent owner-operator already stretched thin on margins, it's a serious investment that might take years to recoup. Other alternatives include diesel-fired cab heaters that heat the sleeper without running the engine, and truck stop electrification. Shore power hookups at certain rest stops where a driver can plug the cab into the grid, just like an RV at a campsite. These exist and they're expanding, but coverage is still limited compared to the scale of the trucking network. Here's the legal side, and this one genuinely surprises most people. More than 30 states have anti-idling laws on the books. These laws are designed to reduce air pollution and noise, and they typically restrict how long a vehicle can idle in one spot. In some states, the limit is as short as 3 to 5 minutes. But here's the catch. Federal exemptions for sleeper berth operations effectively override most of those state laws for long-haul truckers on federally regulated routes. If a driver's in their sleeper berth during a mandatory rest period, idling is legally protected at the federal level. The intent is clear. Safety of the driver takes precedence over local idle restrictions, so that truck you hear running at a rest stop at midnight isn't breaking any laws. It's operating inside a legal framework specifically designed to account for the reality of what long-haul trucking actually requires. Let's put all of this together because the big picture is worth stepping back to see. That idling truck is keeping a human being warm enough to sleep safely. It's protecting an engine worth more than most people's cars from preventable damage. It might be running a medical device that keeps a driver breathing correctly through the night, and it's almost certainly maintaining a cold chain that will deliver something to a grocery store or hospital near you tomorrow morning. The diesel hum you hear at a rest stop isn't inefficiency, it's infrastructure. It's the sound of a system that keeps modern life running, one overnight rest break at a time. And that, plainly put, is why truck drivers leave their engines running all night. If this changed the way you think about something you drive past every day, Jarrett was someone who'd get a kick out of knowing this. And if you want more of the real story behind how everyday things actually work, Plainly Put is right here. Subscribe and we'll see you next time.